All right, everybody, welcome to the stream. I promised we'd go live Sunday or today, and I guess we're going live today. Farty, how the fuck are you doing today? Awesome. uh,
Just waiting
so
for God to give me a blowjob.
yeah, yeah, very slappy head, huh?
Yeah, it's already wet enough. Now he's just got to give a fucking good old.
just the mop up afterward, right? Um.
Get the mop up after the squirt.
Oh my god, dude. I'm going to hell for that. Anyway, uh hmm. Farty, have you seen the news lately?
Not really.
Apparently, President Trump is going to release uh the UFO files that have been collected over the many years of I'm sorry, I'm trying not to laugh. Over the many years of UAP phenomenon. Mhm. Well, I guess the P in UAP stands for phenomenon, but yeah, apparently Trump is they've been holding congressional hearings about
Mm.
UAPs. And I watched a good bit of it yesterday, and they're like, "Oh, well, we've been, running recovery programs of crashed vehicles, and uh, um, I don't know I don't know what the U in UAP stands for. I think it's unidentified or something. Holy fuck, Twitch is unusable. I saw you picked up Forever Winter. No, I just picked up the demo for it. And I wanted to play it, but it um OBS crashed on me. It's a very steep learning curve to it. Um, I'm probably not gonna go back to play it. I just don't have the attention span or the patience for it. Um, but I picked up the demo, and you can play the demo for free on Steam right now. But yeah, UAPs are the whole. There's been like congressional hearings over the course of like the last, I don't know, 7-8 months, and Trump is apparently Donald Trump said, well, the American public can handle the truth about UFOs and shit. So, uh, how much, Farty? How much of this do you think is just going to be aircraft, foreign aircraft?
Pretty much all of it.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see if the dude who's I don't know the most fucking what's the term I'm looking for sort of I guess involved in the giving of the evidence is the same bloke that was basically coming out and saying that he was all that in a bag of chips fucking several years ago, and I actually did in
Right.
fact do a little bit of a breakdown on Dodger's old channel. It turns out that this guy is basically a fucking ancient alien staffer from fucking the Discovery Channel. Had his own production company, basically putting forward bullshit fucking UFO claims.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um, I'm not a huge fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? Like I think we've established that. I'm not a huge fan. I do enjoy the way he breaks down concepts, but I don't enjoy the way he talks down to people in the breakdown of some of those concepts. I myself have been guilty of it when I'm trying to explain something, and I feel and subconsciously I feel like I have to dumb it down for someone. I've subconsciously reverted to talking real slow and trying to make sure they understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. Shit like that, right?
mm,
But unidentifiable anomalous phenomenon. Yeah, that's I figured the U was unidentifiable, um but yeah, I don't really I don't think I'd like him as an individual, but I do agree with him on a lot of shit. The political shit, I don't agree with him at all on. But some of it is okay. Well, everyone has smartphones in their pockets now,
Mm.
and if you see a UFO or are abducted by a UFO, you can take a video of it. Now, where I where I draw the where I draw a line in the sand at that point is there is wiggle room, right? There is wiggle room in something like that, I think, for documenting a UFO, right? For civilians documenting UFOs. Not everyone is going to be able to quick whip out their phone, unlock it, and then start recording right away.
Well,
And
take Area 51 for example, right?
right.
And you can explain pretty much everything at Area 51 or Groom Lake pretty simply. You have a look at just what the era and fucking the
Oh
description of
yeah,
the UFOs were. So
for
like back in
sure.
the 50s and shit, they had cylindrical cigar or type objects. Well, that's the U2. And then
Yeah.
when you get into the 60s and 70s, now they're more triangular and dark and shit. Well, there's your SR 71 and the F-117 fucking Nighthawk.
Yeah.
You know?
You also got to remember that in the 70s is also early. I was doing some research. In the early 70s, they started early drone adoption
Yep,
and testing.
yep.
And they were experimenting with counter, or is it contra rotating um propulsion.
Contra, yeah, contra-rotating propellers is basically when you got two propellers, one back to back, and then one spinning clockwise, the other one
Right.
spinning anti-clockwise. Um,
Right.
like on the Fairy Gannet and the Tu-95 Bear.
Yeah.
Fucking,
Or
but then like you get into like the 90s and 2000s, right? And then you hear basically, oh, we never seen nothing like it, but it turns like nothing you ever seen before. And then you have a look at the F-22 Raptor.
oh yeah. Oh yeah, that raptor can fucking corner like a son of a bitch.
Yeah,
Damn
super
near.
maneuverable.
Yeah, it's like what, damn near a 90-degree turn when banking.
Yeah, it's aerodynamically unstable for the simple reason that they want it to actually not fly in a straight line.
Right. Yeah, because it's a fighter plane.
Hmm.
You want a fighter plane to be nimble and agile and do shit you've never seen before.
Yeah. And if you didn't know what you were looking at, didn't know what you were talking about, or didn't know what the fuck the US military was doing, you would see something maneuvering at night, like lights over fucking Groom Lake, and it'll do something like a hammerhead maneuver and all this
Oh
kind
yeah.
of shit. You'd be like, what the fuck was that?
Or small VTOL, because another thing they've been experimenting with small single man VTOL vehicles.
Well, they've had that since the 60s with the Harrier
Right.
and the
Right. And that's
P-1157.
right. And that's kind of like some of the stuff that's been coming out recently has been like the VTOL stuff, the drone stuff,
See,
and
well, here's one thing I bet you didn't know. It's like before the Harrier, right?
mhm,
Way back in the 60s, well before the Harrier actually even was built, right? They had this program called the P-1157,
yeah,
and it was called as they actually called it the Kestrel, and it
yeah,
was a joint venture between America, Britain, and Germany for a vertical takeoff aircraft, and it basically looked like the Harrier but slightly smaller. It was sort of kind of like if you described what a Harrier looked like over the phone to somebody.
yeah. I remember seeing a schematic drawing of a prototype that didn't quite get made, but I think it was like it was on a History Channel type deal. Not it wasn't the History Channel. It was on something like uh fuck.
A&E or something.
Not even. It was a documentary on YouTube, and I'm trying to remember what it
Ah,
was. But it was like because sometimes I watch those documentaries on like specific vehicles. And one of them, one I remember, was like the Horning G10, I think it was called. It was
Oh,
that, huh?
that fucking wing shaped thing from World War II that everyone likes
Yeah,
to tout as fucking. Oh, it's the first stealth bomber. Oh, no, it fucking
it
wasn't.
never made it to production. It
Yeah.
never got off the fucking ground. Well, I mean, it got off the ground. They made like, I think they made 5 of them, just like they made like 5 or 6 of the Ryu Shinden.
Mm.
Um,
Well,
that
fucking Northrop already had a fucking
yeah,
massive flying wing. Like, see, the B-2 goes all the way back to the fucking 40s. Like,
yeah,
Northrop already originally built a propellered version of it, and then in the 50s they did a fucking 8-engine fucking jet version of it, and
yeah,
then it evolved later on down into the B-2 Stealth, like the B-2 Spirit.
yeah. Um,
And both earlier iterations, they were deemed too revolutionary for the time. And well, when you sort of
yeah, they
realise
would have
that the
been too
B,
expensive to build.
well, not just that, but fucking those kinds of designs, and like say again with like the F-22 Raptor, are not designed to fly in a straight line and all this kind of shit. So
Yeah,
they need so many computers and shit to monitor all the flight controls just to keep it moving in a straight line. It's just too difficult to handle for a normal pilot, and that's the same thing with these flying wings. And it was only until the B-2 Stealth when they had the technology to actually make it work properly.
right. But like I said, I was watching something and they had like design schematics. It was like it was one of those where like it was the Horning stealth jet was one of them was a video I'd seen the in the same vein as the thing I'd seen on this um on this concept aircraft that I don't think made it off the drawing board, but it was an aircraft that was designed to look like um how the fuck do I put this? Um you remember the spacecraft in Flight of the Navigator?
Yeah,
So you remember how like the one form it took was like a long oblong object with like it was a
Inspector
cylinder.
Gadget's police car, pretty much.
Well,
You
pretty
went
much.
from the chunky van to the sleek little sports car DeLorean looking thing,
Right. But no,
kinda.
it like there was one part in the movie where the spacecraft turns into like a cylinder, but it was pointed at either end.
Mm.
Um, so you had this cigar shaped object, quote unquote, but it was like
I'm wondering if you're thinking of the lifting body project.
I th- that sounds familiar, but like there were
Basically, they're really short, stubby wings, but a big flat bottom fuselage kind of thing, and it's just
oh
the
no,
progenitor to the space shuttle, pretty much. Design.
this thing was just a cylinder,
Uh,
and on either end there was a point, and there wasn't a cockpit because they weren't planning on putting a person into it. It was just too small to put a person into it with the technology they had at the time, which I think was like around the 50s, 60s. But it was meant to be an aerial recon device, and it was just this, and I forget what country designed it. It had to have been like Germany or fucking Russia or China. I don't remember which, but I do remember that it has like cylindrical shape, that it's pointed at either end, and that it was designed to hover using contra rotation. So as early as the 1950s, they were experimenting with contra rotation and whatnot. And so when I see people talk about UFOs and shit, I'm almost always under the impression that it's just an aircraft that
yep.
that is being tested, and that if people get a glimpse of it, you're not the government isn't trying to keep it from you specifically, and they're not trying to keep it under wraps specifically. They're testing a device, and they're hoping that that device goes unnoticed.
Well, that's the whole
um
point of Groom Lake.
Right.
It's so far out the back of fucking buggery that no one's really supposed to be able to see it from a distance. And if you do get close enough to it, you get shooed away.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's not just the fucking stealth shit and the experimental stuff and the SR-71 and the U-2, but like during the Cold War, the Yanks actually acquired numerous actual Russian fighter aircraft like MiG-15s, MiG-23s, MiG-21s,
Oh yeah.
MiG-19s, and stuff like that. And they're actually using them out of Groom Lake as aggressor squadrons, like to like actually train against proper Russian aircraft.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
was something that they kept fucking secret for. It was Pave something. I can't remember the program, but they kept that fucking secret up until like fucking not very long ago, like only about 10 years ago, that they sort of, yeah, we got all these Russian aircraft and we've been flying them for fucking decades.
Jester says that I might be thinking of the Christmas bullet. Um,
But yeah, when you
funny.
get onto like the
No, it
people
wasn't
are
that.
probably just looking at aircraft. I mean, yeah, the very definition of unidentified flying object is pretty much a very, very loose definition because, like, I'm an aviation enthusiast and I could
Mm-hmm.
fucking probably tell you from a description what the fuck it actually was. But, you know, if you have no idea what the fuck a plane looks like, you'd be like, well, I don't understand. It's like I was saying with the F-22, like, cunts were saying these super maneuverable. I've never seen a plane move like that. And it's like, well, actually, you probably have, but you're too stupid to understand it.
Oh yeah.
And the
Um,
best thing I love about these kinds of people too is that you get this in the truth movement as well, is that they feel like they carry on as if they're like consummate experts on it. They know absolutely fucking everything, and it's quickly determined that no, they have no idea.
it's that psychological. I forget what the term in psychology is, but it's that psychological phenomenon where the dumbest people, or the people who aren't as educated on a thing they think they are,
Mm,
always scream the loudest about being educated on the thing they think there are. Like I like planes. I have always liked planes. I guess my love of planes, and this is stupid, I know, but my love of planes can be traced directly to the Transformers because I thought Starscream was the most hilarious fucking character there ever was because he was always doing some stupid shit. He was always fucking around and finding out. And
mm,
so I have a love for planes, but my knowledge of aeronautics only goes so far. I like planes, but I'm not as much of a of an aeronautics buff as you are, Farty. But
mm.
I like to think I'm fairly knowledgeable, especially on some of the newer productions. And I do go back and study some of the older stuff from time to time. And I agree with you. Like they're just people who don't understand that just because you haven't seen it doesn't make it a UFO.
Mm-hmm.
That's equivalent to me walking into a diner and going, huh, I've never seen this thing on the menu before. I don't know how to pronounce it. So let me ask the waitress. I'm going to point at it and ask the waitress because it's got some impossible to pronounce fucking name or whatever. And then she brings you out a fucking cheeseburger,
Mm.
but it's slightly different from what you're used to. Okay, well, I've never seen a cheeseburger like this before. Obviously, I haven't. That doesn't mean it's a fucking UFO.
Where it's like one of those cheeseburger joints that actually puts the cheese inside the patty, and you get the burger. It's like, hey, where's the cheese?
Oh, yeah. I fucking hate that.
Mm. Yeah, well, no, I got into aviation really fucking young. In fact, fucking the first time I near come me duds was
Oh,
the first issue of an aircraft magazine called issue series called Takeoff magazine, and in
mhm.
the first fucking issue, they had a fucking big fucking thing on the A10 Thunderbolt, and I fell in love with it immediately. This was like 1986, I think it was.
Nice. Well, like
Mm.
about a couple years before you went into the service, right?
Oh, this is like when I think of what, shit,
Oh, in the
86 or
80s,
87.
80s. I thought you said 90s. Holy shit.
Yeah, no. The
uh
fucking, but you know, like I remember there's this line in they interviewed the pilot and he was talking about the GAU 8 Avenger and he's like, and when you open up with that gun and he's like literally quote sparks, shit and debris fly everywhere. And I'm just like,
right.
I'm in love with this fucking thing.
Oh, okay, Dester. I see what he said. I'd probably like the Christmas Bullet documentary. Probably. I like watching those kinds of documentaries, especially if they're long ones, because then I can just like put it on in the background and just let it play, and I'll
Oh
just
fuck! Well, I've got I'll send you a link to a bunch of fucking pages I'm subscribed to on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of like Greg's Aviation. They're good ones. He goes into a lot of really fucking technical shit. He's got a whole fucking series on like turbo compound fucking propellant engines of World War Two. Like, you know,
oh
he's got a
nice.
whole fucking series of this the Hawker Sea Fury, the P-47
Yeah.
Thunderbolt, fucking like going through all the different like anything you want to know. Like this is going right down to fucking engine pressures and fucking shit like that. Like stats that fucking in different models too. So like the P-47, D had this type of fucking engine with like this amount of horsepower, and it had, and next one had fucking something
The
in the turbo which
fucking
made extra fucking bloody pressures in the pistons,
can
and that gave it
we
extra more horsepower and fucking yeah.
can we have a moment of appreciation for the P-45?
The P-45.
I think that was the
Hang on.
Mustang, wasn't it?
That's the P-51.
P-51. That's what I meant.
Mm.
Not the what is the P-45? Let me see. Let me see if I'm talking out of my ass again. Because sometimes I do that. I think we all know I do that. Let's see. What I say 45?
Yeah.
P-45 plane. Oh, okay. Yeah, P-47 Thunderbolt. That's the one I'm
Yeah.
thinking of. That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
But
I just
but
mentioned.
the P-51 Mustang is the one that deserves a moment of respect, I think.
In actual fact, it's more the D model out of them because up until the D model, they had older style airfoils plus
Mm,
less rated Packard Rolls Royce engines, but they also had the old fucking Razorback fucking sort of thing where the cockpit doesn't have the bubble canopy. The D model had the bubble canopy. It had the laminar flow wing, which gave it way more fucking efficiency in the air, and it gave it that range that it could escort the bombers all the way from Britain to Berlin.
yeah.
And it was the D model that was the fucking really refined version. That was the good one. That gets all that had that reputation.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put on screen one of the Japanese experimental aircraft that people do sometimes like say, oh well, it was cigar shaped and it was flying. Well, here's mid build or they were tearing it down. I think they were tearing it down in this image. But this is the Kyushu Shinden, I think it's called. Yeah, Kyushu Shinden. I mispronounced it earlier. The Kyushu Shinden, um, or the J7W, was a Japanese prototype, and as you can see, it's very, very cigar shaped.
Mm.
Um, it's got 5 landing gear on it, 2 of which are out at all times. I'm not entirely sure.
They're,
Uh,
they're they're basically outriggers bump stops because when that
yeah,
thing starts pitching up, it's going to strike the tail. So those little wheels on the back are there just to protect the tail and to
right,
stop the propeller from hitting the ground.
right. But what I was trying to say was I'm not entirely sure why people would see this and think UFO right away.
Well, mainly because it's a sort of like it's a forward canard not really a delta rear wing, sort of. It's kind of like the progenitor of like things like the Saab Gripen and the Eurofighter Typhoon, where it's got the main wing at the arse end and it's got canards at the front, which
Yeah.
is like all the control surfaces arse end around. That would have actually more been confusing to most American pilots because the orientation's completely different. Even the fucking props up the other end.
Yeah. It was supposed to be super maneuverable, but
Yeah, it would be.
it never made it to production because by the time they had developed it, I believe World War II was nearing its end.
Mm. Well, that's the whole point of forward canards,
Yeah.
is to actually impart fucking like a turning force on the front part of the aircraft instead of trying to fucking push the ass and kick the nose. You're actually moving the nose so the ass follows you.
Yeah. The Shinden was expected to be a highly maneuverable interceptor, but only 2 prototypes were finished before the end of the war. A jet engine powered version was considered, but never reached the drawing board.
Mm.
That's some next level. Yeah, so like I said, they only got a couple built before the end of the war, and they never actually had a chance to test it. The Japanese started building it around the same time the emperor was like, "Well, we're just gonna go poke the United States, who hasn't entered the war, and we're gonna fuck around and find out. We're gonna do it because Hitler wanted us to do it, so we're gonna go do it. And then that way, we'll get our reward from Germany." And what it ended up happening was they went and fucking in while they were completing the second prototype and starting work on a third, they went and bombed Pearl Harbor, and that was the end of that. Everyone knows what happened after that.
Yeah, the little cunt walked up, the biggest cunt in the bar, thought he was going to knock him out with one punch, went, and then went, oh fuck, he didn't even flinch. Run!
I think the story I remember, and I could be remembering this wrong, is what I heard in social studies class was that the um Japanese government had was given an ultimatum, and they didn't listen the first time. And so shit, was it Roosevelt at the time? No, it wasn't Roosevelt. Who was it in office at the time? Anyway,
Who's the one that was crippled in the wheelchair?
oh, that was Roosevelt. Yeah.
Yeah, he started it off and he died halfway through the war or something, near the end of the war.
Yeah, and then I think hold on. President that um dropped the atomic bomb. Here we go. Because he went to Truman. Truman's the
Yeah.
one who dropped the bombs. Because Truman went to the emperor and he's like, "You're going to stop and surrender right now, or we're going to bomb you." And the emperor was like, "Haha, fuck you." And so Truman was like, "All right, well, here's a bomb for Hiroshima." And then said, "Are you going to stop yet?" And Japan was like, "No, we're not going to stop." And then Truman bombed Nagasaki. And then that's when the what's it called? Um that's when the emperor finally gave in. And that's the story that I heard.
Yeah, so pretty much that's pretty much the way I think.
Yeah. Roosevelt used the war to try to have 4 terms. Yeah.
Yeah, there was another aspect to it as well, is that they were getting their asses kicked in fucking in China, and because we won in Europe, pretty much that allowed the Russians to just turn around and focus their shit on fucking Japan as well. and it was kind of a part of getting nuked twice, plus the
Yeah.
whole fucking oh shit, the Russians are coming. Um, we're doubly fucked, so we may as well give up.
Yeah. So we bombed Hiroshima, we bombed Nagasaki, and then basically they were livable almost right away. Yeah, there was a lot of like contamination and shit, and people were still evacuated, but like people basically moved right back in as soon as the bombing was done.
Well, yeah, that's also mainly because it was an airburst.
Yeah,
And the difference between an airburst and a ground burst nuclear weapon is the airburst doesn't typically sort of suck up very much shit and irradiate it and then drop it back down as fallout, whereas a ground burst does. And the whole point of implementing an airburst is so that you don't irradiate the fuck out of the place and you can actually sort of relatively move in quite quickly afterwards,
right.
which is something that we were sort of toying with the idea during the Cold War that the Russians, we were sort of half thinking that they might have been full of shit about actually having nuclear weapons and that they were actually going to resort to more nerve agents and chemical weapons. So the basically the Russians would fucking advance on Europe. We'd nuke the Russians, they'd gas the fuck out of us and then just move into where we were once the
Yeah.
gas had dissipated.
Gesture says we literally dropped tons of flyers telling people. Yeah, we did. And we made sure they were in Japanese. United States was
Yeah, there were
very
numerous
clear.
flies. And that was partially it's not Okinawa. There's one of the islands. It's like one of the really close island chains that you've got to before fucking you drop the nukes. And
Mm,
wasn't Tinian fucking shit? Des is probably going to fucking answer this for us. But basically, when the Marines got there, right, the civilians were fucking told that like the Yanks were that fucking violent and gruesome that they were better off jumping off cliffs into the fucking ocean and shit like that. And there's footage of this where you got like
mm-hmm.
women with children jumping off a cliff to get away from the Yanks because they were told that, and it was partially because of that. There was leaflets saying, the Yanks aren't that bad. We're not going to fucking eat you, and all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. There are other leaflets saying, to compel them to fucking uprise against the emperor. There was fucking then yeah, we're going to firebomb the fuck out of your city, so run. Um, yeah, numerous leaflets.
Yeah. One of the things, and this is the funny thing, is that the precursor to Transformers toys are what opened up um a somewhat congenial relationship with Japan, and that was GI Joe figures.
Mm.
Um, Now there's a whole big documentary on this, but apparently the story goes, um, after the war, Japan was struggling to rebuild their economy, and the
Might have been the Battle of Saipan.
um the how do I put this? The There was a toy company that wanted to make toys in Japan, and they wanted to make, they wanted the children of Japan to not be afraid of the United States soldiers. So they started manufacturing GI Joe toys in Japan, and converting like a lot of the tooling and shit from doing tin toys and like shit with lead in it to like plastics and rubbers that were a little bit safer. And they started importing the production machines and whatnot, and the GI Joe had its start basically in Japan. Later on they started filling the molds with translucent plastic, and that translucent plastic they could stuff like gears and shit in them. And then you had a robot toy, and then the robot toy slowly became a robot that could change its form. So you had micro change, and Changeman that were like two spin-offs directly related to GI Joe, and then you had the Transformers toys or the Diaclone toys that were and the GoBots. Don't forget the GoBots. Those were also
Or as they were known out here, Machine Men.
Machine Man. Yeah.
Yep.
Uh,
Mighty Machine Men, mighty robots.
yeah, because Machine Man is a direct spin-off of Changeman, and Changeman and Microchange are directly linked to Transformers.
Mm.
And so the precursor of those toy lines was what allowed Japan to, enter the global market by selling the toys or manufacturing and selling, and the kids of Japan would have this GI Joe toy. Um
Yeah, and they fucked up too, and we almost never got an actual fucking VF1 Valkyrie from Robotech because of fucking this one fucking can't remember what the character's called in Transformers was
oh
actually the VF1 Valkyrie,
it
and
depends on they called him two names in
yeah,
Transformers. They called him Jetfire and they called him Skyfire.
yeah,
Uh
yeah. That was mainly because the toy company had already assigned that to fucking the Transformers before fucking Robotech came out in the West. And when Robotech came out, it was like, hey, fuck, we can't sell merchandise because of you cunts. And then they had to
right.
rejig Transformers and pretty much didn't use Skyfire or the Jetstar, whatever the fuck his name was, um, because they still wanted to release the Robotech toys.
Yeah. Actually it was three. It was three names they called him by. It was Jetfire, Jetstorm, and Skyfire. Those were the
Mm.
three names they called him by. And which is stupid because in the English translation of the Toei cartoon, um they called him that all in the first episode he appears in.
I was thinking years ago about fucking
Okay,
like
Macross. I need to say this. I need to get this off my chest. Macross's biggest downfall was trying to squash fandom before it even aired a single episode.
well, Harmony Gold's also been a fuckwit about it for decades too.
Oh yeah. You can't say anything about Macross without Harmony Gold going, what the fuck?
Mm. Yeah, well, years ago I was thinking about making a range of toys
Mm-hmm.
more for like fucking jihadis and shit like that. So like you got Barrel of
Oh my god,
Monkeys.
dude, you almost made me spit out my coffee.
Yeah, you know, you got Barrel of Monkeys. I was going to release Barrel of Fundies.
Oh my god.
Um, you can daisy chain them all up into a fucking long line of bloody suicide bombers. Then there was GI Jihad, the greatest Arabian hero.
Oh my god, Farty, you're gonna get us booted off of fucking YouTube. Farty, when we do get booted off of YouTube, it will be your fault.
But
And
now,
on that,
hey, now I've
huh?
just got an idea for your fucking 3D printer. You can print up barrels of fundies and fucking GI Jihads.
Yeah.
Let me
Is
make
that
them at
true?
least.
Did the creator of Macross say just pirate it to fuck over Harmony Gold? I gotta
Probably.
I gotta check that. I gotta fact check that. Give me a second. Uh, um, Macross. Oop.
Hmm.
Okay. I gotta type it in. Give me a second here. Um, Creator of Macross, Shoji Kawamori, has never publicly told people to pirate the series in response to Harmony Gold actions. However, there has been widespread frustration among fans and even some involved in the anime industry over Harmony Gold's handling of the Macross franchise outside of Japan, especially their long-standing legal hold that prevented many Macross series from being released internationally for decades.
or
Some
the fucking
fans,
soundtrack or anything else along with it.
yeah. Um,
But that's sort of also something that's quite indicative of a lot of Japanese
oh
things
yeah,
like that, like anime and associated anime things. Is a lot of it just is only in Japan, and you can like the only way you can get it in a lot of cases if you got a mate in Japan who can actually walk into a shop and buy it for you.
oh yeah. Transformers famously, Hasbro was working with Toei, and
Mm,
Toei is famous for like strangle gripping their IPs. The GI
mm,
Joe cartoon was produced by Toei. The Transformers cartoon, GI Joe, and there was one other big '80s action cartoon that was produced in Japan um that people don't actually realize was produced in Japan. I'm trying to remember what the fuck it was, but I don't. It's on the tip of my tongue. Uh, and then you had other shows that got squashed by Toei, right? Like Toei wouldn't produce episodes unless Transformers, Voltron was another one that Toei produced that I think um but either way, Toei would refuse to produce episodes unless they got, a good time slot, which would force other shows like Inhumanoids to other time slots and then not be as watched. And therefore just kind of only got one season, even though it was a really fucking good show. I think I introduced you to an episode or two of that Farty recently, didn't I?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really good show. Especially for a fucking kids cartoon. They had a really good solid plot, and then you get these Japanese these like super like authoritative Japanese firms coming after shit they have no right coming after. It's like the Nintendo stuff. Have you heard about what Nintendo's doing?
Oh, yeah, I'll believe what you'll say because fucking yeah, I kind of know a lot about Nintendo's history.
Oh yeah. So the one thing that actually made me go and not forgive any fucking thing Nintendo did was they went after a guy who and I kid you not, his last name is Bowser. I kid you not. He had nothing to do with Nintendo. He had nothing to do with anything, but they went after this guy who did marketing graphic design for Team Executioner. Team Executioner is is a cracker group, right? Software cracking.
Mm,
Uh and they're responsible for like making mod chips and shit. And he was this guy Bowser was making, graphic design and other like just marketing materials for Team Executioner. He wasn't even involved in selling anything. He wasn't involved with making anything. He just happened to be the guy that Team Executioner hired to do marketing materials for that were later delivered via like email or something that he didn't even print. He was a freelance fucking graphic design artist. And Nintendo went after him. He now has to pay Nintendo like $14 million. And this dude's like in his 50s. He's gonna be paying Nintendo for the rest of his life. If he's
mm.
lucky for the rest of his life. Um,
He should move to Australia and then refuse to pay them because we don't really have that much of a litigious uh, sort of fucking consciousness out here.
yeah.
We'll just break your fucking face open instead of suing the crap out of you because it's a lot quicker and easier and it makes you feel better instantly. Um, so yeah, move out here, refuse to pay them, and then if they want to take you to court again, tell them to come out here and get you, and our courts will just tell them to fuck off.
Yeah.
This is frivolous. You can go suck a dick. We were overruling the last one too. Fuck off. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Don't come back.
So Nintendo's been going after modifying your consoles, specifically the Switch, and now with the Switch 2. If and this is in their fucking terms of service for the Nintendo Switch 2. If you modify or alter the Switch in any way, they can and will in their terms of service and on the back of the fucking box. If you walk into a store and you go, "Hey, I want to look at one of those Nintendo Switch 2 deals," and you look at the back of the box, it will literally say on the back of the box that they can and will remotely deactivate your Switch and then brick it.
There also a lot of companies are doing that with like pre-releases and stuff like that too. There's a bloke up the servo we get me coffee from. He was telling me about him and a couple of his mates had got like an early release copy of something or other, and they weren't allowed to touch it until a certain date. And one of his mates went and fucking played it, and they instantly figured it out and bricked his shit.
Yeah.
The fucking Karamurai official statement, Macross. For Macross during an interview, please support the official Macross release. He considers Robotech to be a pirated version of his work. Well, kind of is, because, well, the Robotech is like a westernized, chopped up, bastardized version of not just Macross, but a couple other cartoons. And it's not, doesn't really line up with the actual Macross storyline. And I'm more
Yeah.
Robotech than Macross, so. But with the Nintendo and being such fucking assholes about it, this
Oh
all
yeah, I heard
stems
about
way
that.
back to the 1980s with the computer game crash, and that was purely caused because there was so many people out there making aftermarket shit for all the different platforms that were out there at the time, but there was
I
zero quality control. And it's only after watching fucking AVGN that fucking I've realised that half the fucking games that didn't work wasn't the fact that the Commodore 64 was a piece of shit, was the fact that we bought fucking dodgy shit that was, like, in some cases, blank fucking tapes. So
I
that's why
still
fucking,
don't completely buy that as the reason the industry crashed.
no,
Yeah,
what
it was
definitely was.
certainly, huh?
It definitely was, because there was so much aftermarket shit out there. All the, like, Sega and Atari and Nintendo couldn't
Right.
really sell their stuff, and it really did sort of like almost kill the fucking market. I think it killed Atari and nearly killed fucking Sega. And then after that, Nintendo was like, "No, you buy our license, you do exactly what we say, and if you do not do it, we will punish you to fuck." And
Yeah, but
that's been their attitude since.
you still had people like Wisdom Tree who circumvented
Still don't know how they got
Nintendo.
away with that.
Uh they threw their games into Christian stores, and they basically said, "Well, video games don't get sold in Christian stores anyway. How the fuck is Nintendo going to find out? If they do find out, what are you going to do? Go after the Christian stores?"
That's what
And
I'm. That's more what I'm thinking. Sort of like, yeah, you sue us, you're going to be the
but
arsehole suing the Christian life mob. So yeah, you're going to be a cunt out of this either way.
right. But the problem is, right? I don't buy the shovelware being the problem, because the problem is even after Nintendo um went and created their whole license seal of quality bullshit, 90% of the games on the NES or on the Famicom, depending on how you want to look at it, 90% of that crap was shovelware. There's
Mm,
only a handful of good games on the NES. There's only a handful of good games on the Master System, on the Genesis Mega Drive.
mm-hmm,
There's only, most of it is shovelware. And even today, like, shovelware is becoming more and more rampant. So
mm-hmm.
I don't buy that, poor quality products was the thing that killed the industry. I think it was a contributing factor. Um the the reason I think the video game industry bounced back in 85 wasn't because, the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was the way that Nintendo branded stuff in the United States. Um and that was like the the NES, right? Not the Famicom, but the NES. The shell was designed in such a way that it would look at home in someone's entertainment center because it vaguely looks like a VCR.
Yeah,
And that's what
Betamax.
yeah, and that's what sold the console. Um I'm using shovelware as a broad umbrella gesture. Shovelware meaning for like hardware crap and add-ons and other things. Even Nintendo came out with a slew of add-ons for the NES.
Peripherals.
Yeah.
And a
They
lot of them were shit and didn't work.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um and what it ended up happening you had this major rebranding effort. Video games in the in the East, in Japan and China, were as big as they ever were in the 1980s. They didn't suffer a massive drop from the research I've done. They didn't like arcades were huge in Japan at the time. And what had happened was a combination of the way Nintendo marketed and the mafia style shit they pulled in Japan to stay on top, and they still pull to this day. The mafia style shit they pull, and then you also had the fact that they were relatively new to the east, to the Western market. And I can kind of lump, even though technically Australia's in the east for all intents and purposes, they can kind of be lumped in with the Western market just because English speaking. Um,
Well, we're Western market because we're more aligned with Britain and all of that kind of stuff. Really,
right.
I would call it Oceania or Australasia.
Right. Yeah, because you're closer to Asia than you are to like the
Mm,
United States or the UK.
yeah.
Um, when Nintendo's run by Yakuza, let's that's just the way it is. It's like most businesses in Japan are run by Yakuza.
I remember it back in the day where because we had the Commodore 64 in my
Mhm.
place. We didn't actually have like a Nintendo or a Sega or anything like that.
Right.
We could hire them from a video shop, which we used to do sometimes over the weekend, but then be disappointed in like the 4 or 5 games that we get, and they were pretty shit anyways.
Yeah, you'd
But
play for 10 minutes and you'd be like, fuck, this sucks. Let's
yeah,
hope the next one's better. Oh,
yeah,
fuck, this one's as bad as the last one.
yeah. And there's only so many times you could play Choplifter before that gets fucking boring.
Right.
Um, and
And that
fucking
highlights an issue with the Nintendo, because even when the NES and the Famicom started making their way to or Western markets, um, they still had shovelware bullshit. They still had proprietary bullshit. Um,
Well, the Commodore 64, I don't really think they had that many actual games that we bought from the shop because all of them pretty much were shared from friends and stuff like,
yeah.
yeah, mate would have a game that he got off somebody and he'd copy a disc and you grab it at school and all this kind of shit. With games on tapes, um, fucking, well, it's funny, I was explaining this to Miss Murder once about fucking number stations and how data can be transferred over by like sounds and shit like that.
Hmm.
So it's the same thing as like when the old used to have the old dial-up modem. And
My friends and I used to do what's called freaking, and that's
yeah,
where you take the frequency tones that would come through, and
mm,
you would feed them back into the phone to do weird
dial
shit.
numbers and shit.
Yeah,
You
you could
get access to overseas lines, and yeah,
or make local calls for free, or use a payphone as a free dial-up modem in public.
yep. And if you ever remember the old TV show Emergency,
Mm-hmm.
every time they used to get a fire call, it was like "Brr, brr, brr, brr." That was actually an audio fucking signal that, like, in the middle of the night, it'd do shit like it'd turn the lights on,
Yeah.
and it'd fucking I'd do a bunch of shit, and there'd be different stations that you could set it off by sound. They still use that kind of thing,
Oh
even
yeah.
with like terror warning, bloody, and it's like terror warning and natural disaster warning, air raid sirens and stuff like that. But there used to be a community radio station in a suburb of Sydney called Burwood, and it was in Burwood Park, just up from the fucking the RSL. And during the night, like between like midnight and like 6, they would just play games. Like they'd
Yeah.
put a Commodore 64 tape, and they'd play the signal over the radio, and you tune in, and the old tape deck cassette recorder with
Yeah.
the radio already on it, and you just wait for the cue, and you just press record, and then like 10, 20 minutes later, it's the recording's done. You press stop. There you go. You got yourself a game.
Yeah. BBC would give out free games sometimes over their stuff.
Mm,
Um over their airwaves. So you'd had people like hook up their cassette deck to the TV and tape the sound off the line out jack and into onto a tape.
mm, yeah,
Um was-
yeah, and that's how rampant piracy was with the Commodore 64.
yeah. And I honestly don't think piracy is what killed the video game industry either. Um that it might have been a contributing factor, but to be honest, when everything is shovelware and then you do get those last few good games, you don't want to pay
Well,
for those last few good games. You don't want to pay for the risk.
well, another problem also too was that a lot of the games there was zero quality control with a lot of them, and this has been part of
Yeah.
Nintendo's fucking big beef was that because there was no quality control with it, and after a third party could make it a Nintendo game, you'll just mistake it as being a Nintendo game, and you'll think, oh, this is shit. And when you consider that, like, you could even go into shops, right? As Helicopter Gunship was an AH-64 Apache game,
Mm-hmm.
and it never worked past a certain screen. And I found out like fucking 30 years later, that's because it never had the full game on the disc. And you bought
Yeah.
that one out of a shop that came in a big box and all sorts of fucking. That was basically my introduction to Soviet fucking era military gears because they had this big long glossary of like all the different tanks and APCs and artillery pieces and stuff that you were supposed to be able to determine in 8-bit. We're fucking in 8-bit from the air, mind you.
Yeah.
And like it games like that, like they were selling shit that was intentionally not finished, or buggy as fuck, or even like I said, blank fucking tapes. And that was causing a lot of concern amongst the thing. And that's where Nintendo was like, yeah, we really don't want third parties doing that to us because it'll fuck our reputation. And that's part of the reason why they're so like such a bunch of Nazis about it.
Yeah. That's for sure. That was fairly common even after the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that still just further proves my point is that I don't believe for a second that the video game crash was caused um by the shovelware and the proprietary bullshit. Because we have proprietary bullshit and shovelware now. Wherever you look, you could walk into a store or sit at a computer, you will see something proprietary that is locked down, that is more locked down now than it was in the 80s, in the 90s, probably even in the 70s. Um, but it it just furthers my point that I don't that couldn't have been the reason. Because if that were the reason, then we'd be running through crashes of different industries, even to today. right?
I thought the dot-com bubble was more at the end of the 90s.
It was. I included the 90s in there. I said the 90s, the 80s, the 70s, maybe. But it's I just don't believe that it was the thing. It might have been a contributing factor. In fact, I'm fairly certain it was a contributing factor, but I think the crash was more about the staleness of the industry, of the video game industry. And I think that's what happened because we're starting to see that with movies right now. We're not going to see it with video games anytime soon because the video game industry is witnessing a renaissance of sorts, and that renaissance is directly tied to indie game developers. It is the era of indie game developers. I don't know how long that's going to last, but that's where we are right now. We're not going to see a video game industry crash again for a while, but we will see a movie industry crash. We're going to see we're going to see services like Netflix and HBO Max and all these other streaming services just take a shit
Or
sometime
amalgamate.
soon. Huh?
Or amalgamate.
I don't think they'll amalgamate. They would have to amalgamate to stay relevant. But they won't do it. They won't do it for the same reason they didn't want to for the same reason that CNN and ABC didn't want to be on cable without, paying a subscription to those organizations. Indie and Double A. I don't I don't think Double A is a market, to be honest with you. I think it's either indie or big studios that we know. And we're seeing a lot of those big studios that we know shutter. And they've been acquired by other larger studios, yes, which is why they were shuttered. Yes. But you're going to have like Microsoft won't take it on the chin. Microsoft is actually going to stay relevant because they now allow Steam onto their platform. Like you can get Steam games now on the Xbox platform. You can play Xbox games on the Steam platform. It's a give and take relationship. You're going to see it with Sony to an extent. You're going to see it with Nintendo for sure. Nintendo is going to fade into obscurity sooner or later. Um,
With the streaming stuff, I think it was Red Letter Media did a video not so long ago, several weeks ago,
yeah,
pretty much sort of explaining it that like you've got 24 streaming services, and
minimum.
realistically, there's only like one or two things that is of any interest on the majority of them.
Yeah.
And pretty much for the price of a movie,
Hmm.
um, you can have a streaming service,
Yeah.
but you'll have a streaming service that have like one fucking episode or something on it, like or one series that you want to watch. Say, like Apple TV, for example. I'd only sort of get that to watch the full versions of Ted Lasso. I'm not really interested in doing that, but that's
Right.
my example. I got no idea what else is on Apple TV, and I'm
For like
sure as shit
20.
not going to go and get it just for one fucking TV series.
Yeah.
And
For
that's
20.
that's and that's where like all of these streaming companies are going to realize that fucking every time they put something up on air, some cunt's copying it and they've already put it up on some pirating site. So
Yeah.
if you're like me, and you got your own navy, you don't bother paying for any streaming services. You just go to a pirate website and then create your own playlist of fucking
Yeah.
shit you wanted to watch. So these streaming services are either going to have to, you know, modify themselves to make it so that you're paying one the one fair price, but you get all the stuff that you want, or they'll just go elsewhere. And that's what happened to the DVD industry. Why go down to your local DVD shop, pay fucking $7 to rent out a bloody a new release overnight, and if I don't know, fucking car breaks down and you got called away for something, or like me during 2001, had
Mm-hmm.
fucking is it 16 days on the bloody fire ground, and I'd hired like a couple of nights, or the night before I fucking got called away was I hired about 5 fucking new releases. So I had to be back the next night. 16
Yeah.
days later, right? I know shit walked into the Blockbuster in me fire brigade gear, black as a nigger's ass at midnight, smelling like I'd fucking just been
Oh
fucking
shit.
fried, and handed them back in. They go, "Oh, we've already billed you for them." I'm like, what the fuck?
Farty did
And they
every
go,
crime.
we know shit, fucking, we've taken the money out of your account, you now owe them, but we want them back. It's like, I walk back out with them. It's like, no, you just told me I owned them, so go fuck yourself. And
Oh
it was the
yeah.
last time I went there. And I was like, you're going to fucking do that when I look like this? You're not going to give me any consideration. Like, it's not like this was just a couple of pissy little fires. Like, this was like 200 something fires burning for like 6 weeks fucking straight. And you're going to fucking still punish me for this shit? Go fuck yourselves.
Yeah.
So, uh, like, why would you go through that shit? And then, like, even if then, like, you had a couple of days, you got to pay some fucking monstrous, great big fucking fine for being late and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, nah, you know what? I'll just go pirate it for free. Fuck you.
Yeah. But to what you said, for 20, for $20, US, which is the price of a movie ticket,
Mm-hmm.
you can have hundreds of thousands of hours of entertainment at your fingertips, or you can, put on your sailing hat.
Mm.
And with how shitty movies have been lately,
Yeah, who's going to do that either? Yeah.
who's gonna pay to see this crap on? Okay, I to be fair, most people are more interested in having something on the background, so the shitty writing isn't a isn't a concern for most people anymore. But mark my words, it's gonna get to a point where, because especially now, since inflation has gone up, what, fucking 50% in the last 5 years. Thanks, Mr. Biden.
Mm.
But at a rate of 50% in 3 to 5 years, who has the money for it anymore? I remember Fallout 76 charging you full price for a cardboard disc and download link you can't return.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then to add
Oh,
insult,
microtransactions.
yeah, through stuff it full of microtransactions. And then if you bought the collector's edition, you didn't get a nice little canvas duffel bag like they promised. You got
Yeah,
a shitty
a
little,
nylon beach bag.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Obama's third term.
Pretty much. Um,
He's sitting in his sweats in his basement with an earpiece in.
yeah. But it's interesting how we seamlessly went from talking about UFOs to how stupid Nintendo is. Um, it's getting to the point where every industry is going to have some sort of implosion over the next 5 years.
Well, it doesn't help when Hollywood doesn't fucking learn. Like every
Oh
time
yeah,
they sort of go, oh well, here's an Oppenheimer and a Barbie. If you want to go see the girly movie, there's the girly movie. You want to see the big splody movie, go see the big splody movie. There's one for the boys and one for the girls. There you go. Fucking, and then they go and fuck it up with like fucking. Oh, look at this Riri Williams fucking bloody 2-bit fucking thug that they're trying to paint up to be a bloody hero like fucking Iron Man when she's just a piece of shit human being. And like, wow, who's going to watch Ironheart? Fuck that thing. Shit.
yeah,
Yeah, but that's where they don't learn. And as soon as like, they're coming back, quick, let's fuck it up again. Oh, they're running away. Why?
yeah.
What do you think, dickhead?
But yeah, there's a reckoning coming, and
Mm.
it's going to be to these subscription providers, and it's going to be to it's coming for the to the subscriptioners. We'll just call them, because you need a subscription to watch TV. You need a subscription to play video games. You need a subscription to wipe your fucking ass.
Mm.
And it's
Well,
coming
then
to
there's another thing with Hollywood too, and then that's just the amount of fucking money that costs them to make something. Because you've got fucking just as good quality, if not in some cases better, on fucking YouTube videos that cunts did fucking, just with a handheld camera in their own bloody time and stuff like that. Like sort of kind of like how Peter Jackson first started out. He just didn't have
right.
YouTube at the time. And there's Jeremy Clarkson said it best, where he said the future is on the line, because most people are getting their content online nowadays, and it is just getting too fucking expensive to do something in like a TV production or anything like that.
Yeah.
So like, Top Gear was going to be on its way out anyways, because it was just fucking too expensive.
Yeah.
And when you do have that outlet like streaming services or YouTube or any other fucking platform like that, where you can go and cut most of your expenses. You don't have to have crews, and you don't have to have this union fee bullshit and all the Hollywood nonsense. And literally, you could do what like fucking Adam Sandler and fucking people like that did. Like, say with like Grown Ups, for example, that literally looked like Adam Sandler got his mates together with a couple of cameras and like their mates who were fucking crew on some other movies, and just went,
Oh yeah.
let's just go and film ourselves fucking around for a weekend or something.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I need to quote something here. Tony Stark made this in a cave with a box of scraps. That about sums up the nature of modern film, right? Of like film from the last, I'm going to be really generous here and say 10 years. But really it's been more like 15 years that we've just been getting, and it's been a steady decline, right? Gone are the days where Conan O'Brien writes for The Simpsons. Gone are the days where we have
Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunders. Yes, thank you. These movies can't exist now. They can't. Why? Because fucking everybody's trying to nickel and dime you for the cheapest fucking thing.
Well, I like the quote from the interview with Joe Rogan and RDJ about Tropic Thunder, and Joe Rogan goes, "You can't make that movie today," and RDJ goes, "Oh, you can." Fucking yeah. Well, I I I can see why Clarkson would be fucking being compelled to run for office. He's very opinionated. He does kind of have an idea of what he's on about, and he does sort of kind of want to get Britain back onto where Britain should be. And particularly, I'm all for his policy of police snipers fucking taking out cunts who drive too slow on the highway. I wish they'd do it out here.
I think today's stream is going to end with this. I am in favor of what Florida is doing. I'm in favor of. Oh God, don't get me started on Spaceball 2. But
Gator Traz.
Oh God. Fuck you, farty. But I'm in favor of what Florida's doing. I'm in favor of what the Florida State Police have said in a press statement that was recently released, and I know Farty has seen it, but I'm going to paraphrase it here just a little bit because I know I'm not going to get it exactly right. But
Well, just real quick, I like what Idaho police were saying today about that fucking dude in that fucking park. If any cunt sees him and you got a line on him, shoot the cunt.
Alligator Alcatraz is the most Florida thing ever. It is. But the Florida State Police basically came out and said, if you hit a cop, you're going to jail after you go to the hospital. If you shoot at a cop, we're going to call your family and tell them where to gather the remains because we will kill you. I am very pro that approach. I think for too long we've been stripping the power away from systems that keep people safe, and we have systems that have collapsed in on themselves and don't keep people safe.
Mm-hmm.
And we need some of that back.
No idea what that cunt Idaho's deal was as of yet. Honestly, don't give a fuck. Bury the cunt as far as you can in a big fucking pile of fucking shit. I really don't give a flying fuck what that fucker's problem was.
Why bury him? We just throw him on top.
As soon as he starts shooting at firefighters, the fucker can just die and leave it at that. Piss on the cunt's grave.
Why not just throw him on top of the shit pile and piss on him directly? Why go through the extra effort of burying him?
Yeah,
all right. Well,
either way,
we're gonna leave it on that. Farty, I hope these storms don't hit you too bad. And until next time,